At the height of its popularity in the 1980s, Masters of the Universe was absolutely everywhere. Whether it was the toys, whether it was the cartoon, whatever you name it, Masters of the Universe fever was certainly everywhere. It would be no exaggeration, and all pun intended, that these toys certainly had the power. Now, a quick history lesson will tell you that by 1987, this line was not what it once was, and not even a live-action movie with Dolph Lundgren and Frank Langella starring in it, nor some really cool items like a Scareglow figure or an Eternia playset could save this line. Somehow, the power had just dissipated. Now, of course, along with this quick history lesson, by 1990, the new adventures of He-Man would come in and give it a little bit of a spike, but never quite caught that traction. And of course, in the early 2000s, the Mike Young Productions cartoon and toy line gave it something of a boost, but not enough to keep it in the mainstream. But watch that cartoon if you've got some time. Now, times continued to change, and Masters of the Universe Classics by 2008 would result in the toy line being, well, definitely resurging in a collector world, but wasn't hitting the mainstream. We just weren't finding these toys in big box stores. But times have continued to change, and for the last couple of years, we have been, I'm going to say, we're starting to get inundated again in Masters of the Universe product. You go into big box stores, you go into mom and pop shops, and you mention MOTU Origins, and people are starting to know what it is now, and we're finding shows on Netflix. Once again, whatever your feelings happen to be on that front. But with all that said, hi once again, everyone. My name's Ken, and this is a Toy Connections online live stream, or TKO, broadcasting to you whatever part of the world you happen to be in and whatever time of day it happens to be. Okay, so with that interesting or not so interesting ramble at the beginning, and as you can see after the theme song, I actually forgot to put myself on screen, which was for a couple seconds, which is kind of funny. But we got some guests backstage, and I'm going to toss them in each one by one here, and starting with an individual whose personality just absolutely resonates on screen. Once we met for the first time on our friend Chad's stream a little while ago, I just knew I absolutely clicked with this guy, and I love the name of his channel just because he's managed to work his name into his channel name, just like I have. So I'd like to say great minds think alike. But from the Toy Domination YouTube channel, and a link you can find in the description below, this is Dom.
Ken, thanks so much for having me here. I just wanted to say, I noticed you have an intro song, and I think it'd be jived up just a little bit more. So if you don't mind, I kind of did a suggestion on how I think it could go. Now, for those that don't know, I actually have Scandinavian roots, and they are very powerful in the death metal growl. So I got a little song for you, Ken. It goes like this. Ken! If you don't mind, you could use that at the beginning of your intro show, and royalty free. We can work out a deal later on. No?
Welcome to the show, Dom. And it is you. Okay, I was kind of wondering, which of your girlfriends I managed to put on the stream by accident. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, wait a second here. I think I might be on the wrong stream by accident. Okay, that was great, Dom. I actually completely forgot you were a musician, even though I think you may have mentioned it when you were on with your kids at some point. Maybe you mentioned. I'm not sure. But hey, welcome. Love the shirt. Love the vibrant personality.
Thanks, man. Good to be here.
Yes, and time zones be damned. Our next buddy here from South Africa has been on YouTube for a very, very long time. And if you are into G.I. Joe related podcasts, him and his partners are some of the best at it for G.I. Joe insights, be it mostly vintage, but they do cover some modern. So from the legendary G.I. Joburg channel, this is our good buddy, Paul.
There we go. I'm unmuted now. Hey, Ken.
Okay.
And wow, man, thank you so much for the kind words. That's really cool. Yeah. And Dom, rock and roll, my man.
Oh, thanks. You can use that song too if you want.
Oh, thanks, dude. Thanks. Yeah. We'll get our people to get in contact with your people, and we'll take it from there.
My people meet your people. We're connecting. I love it. Like his name's in his YouTube handle, and my name's in my YouTube handle. It just totally works.
I love your TKO as well. I think that's really cool.
Hans Chow actually named it. I was just calling it TK Live at some point, and he goes, "Welcome to TKO." I'm like, that's gonna stick, and you don't get to charge me royalties for that. So, all right,
cool.
And this next individual, last but certainly not least, is somebody whose channel I've been kind of glomming over for a certain period of time. He does everything in the 1980s, not just with toys, even though we love his toy insights. And one of his buddies, Pete, is actually in the chat right now, excellent at toy hunts. And his other partner in crime, Jeff, is really good at some of the toy insights. But whether you're a fan of 80s music, 80s movies, or just cosplay, and lots of cosplay I'd like to mention there, and toys in general, we have from the Chasing 80s Toys YouTube channel, even though we've streamed many times together, but this is his first time on here, we got Chris Miwa, or Orko, as he is known as today. I think you were trying to cosplay quickly, and you're like, oh yeah, you said cosplay, I forgot to put something on. Let's just pretend I'm Orko for today. Right?
Oh, Chris, you boob.
You boob.
You boob.
A ninja is the weapon.
A villain is a boob.
Weren't we gonna say that Paul was a Tommy Arashikage today? So
Close, yeah.
yeah,
Thanks, man.
yeah, and
Hey, Chris.
Hello, guys. Good being here. What a crowd in the chat and on screen. All
Yeah.
legends.
you got to hold up your holy grail, though, Chris.
Oh,
You got to
yes,
hold up
he's
your
here.
grail.
I'm not really
Holy
up for
grail.
appearance, Adam.
Yeah.
Wow.
He just did a great video the other day on this Cringer and finding it out in the wild. I didn't know it's become a holy grail now, because when I got it a few years ago, I sort of just bought it, paid what I thought was too much, didn't think again. Now everyone's trying to get into Masters Classics, and it's just not as it once was. I think Dom was just grabbing his breakfast there, right?
So I thought my Cringer was somewhere in reach, but I was like, that's buried. The kids were playing with it. I have no idea. So I'll pretend like, no, Adam, it's a bad idea. So yeah.
I love the lights behind you, by the way. Like, it just looks so good.
Me?
Looks
Oh
really
yeah,
cool.
I just brought these bad boys on for my comic books recently. I don't know why I haven't lit my comic collection before, but I was like, man, this is so thanks.
So now we have comics in common as well. We got to talk that at some point. So anyway, let's say a quick hello to the chat. And we've got Gazz, who many and all of you know. We got Scuba Pete, whose name I mentioned earlier.
What's up, Scuba Pete?
I think I'm on point this morning, right? I started talking and realized I wasn't on camera after the theme song, and that I quickly had to throw myself on. Normally I'm more on point than that, but yeah. Sergeant Slaughterhouse coming to us at 2 a.m. in the morning. I guess he could not sleep, or he just wants to see some new folks.
Dedication.
Yeah, he was the one who actually introduced me to Paul when we streamed together a number of months ago. Pretty much right at the start of the year. We got Bob Squat. Hello, fine sir. We've got an anonymous Facebook user because I'm co-streaming on the Canadian Toy Gallery, and privacy be damned, they don't show the names on there, but that's okay. We got Nolan, who's in every single chat. He's just like Gazz these days. If he's in the chat, it means your stream is validated. So I guess everybody can go home now. No, stay, keep streaming. Okay, we'll stream. We'll keep streaming. All right. I was trying to be funny, but I didn't even laugh myself when I did that, and I normally laugh at my own jokes very cheekishly. So okay, that's just cool.
I laughed on the inside.
Yeah.
I laughed at me. Okay, that's just really cool, Paul.
Thanks, man.
All
Sorry,
right.
guys. I'm bragging a little bit. I picked up a Hammond Collection T-Rex this afternoon on the grocery run. I saw it there, and I was like, I have to have it, and it's an incredible toy. Wow. Anyway. At least it's Mattel. Mattel makes it. So, like,
South Africa's so cool that when you go to grocery runs, you run into T-Rexes. Got it.
yes, exactly.
Well said.
Shira has a mount.
Look at that.
Yes. And it all matches. It all matches.
For the honor of Grayskull, yes.
Cool. Sorry, Ken, I'm derailing you. I apologize.
No, it's totally fine. I was just, thinking about grabbing my Grimlock and having somebody ride on that and be like, me, Grimlock. But then it's Hasbro. And anyway, Shellback Toy Rewind, who was on here a little while ago. Good to see you, Orlando Flores. And I didn't realize he was even subscribed to the channel, but here's Laser Pants. Hopefully I can see you in a week. Hopefully you drive up here for the Vancouver Comic and Toy Show, and we can shoot the breeze for a little bit. He's a few hours south of me. We got someone called No You Grew Up. No, You Grow Up.
No, you grow up.
Saying hi to the gang. And we got Chaz the Guru here watching he's just been pulled into Masterverse. Sorry to hear that. Or should I say, welcome. It depends on how you want to look at it. Boba Hicks is in the house. He was just on last week, actually. We got Gojatron, wonders where all the cool people are hanging out, and we have some cool people on the screen. Ryan Sweeney in the house.
Hi, Ryan.
Oh, Ryan.
Yes, we got Pop Actor as well, and John Hill Escobar. Man, this is a busy chat for today's stream. Wow, Totally. I guess either you folks are really popular, or the topic's really popular, or the YouTube algorithm finally shined down on me a little bit. Okay, folks, we got a rocketing agenda today, and I'm trying to unsee Dom with that wig on. I keep looking down at that screen.
I can put it back on. No, okay.
It's a little warm on your head, though, isn't it? So for your comfort and personal hygiene, I'm going to say no. Right. Man, that sounded so passive-aggressive. Oh, man.
Well, very Canadian of you, so.
Yes, absolutely. We're known for our over mannerisms. You should see when 3 Canadians get to a door, and they all fight to grab whoever's going to get the handle, and whoever gets it first, like, you first, I insist. No, you first, I insist. Like, I've had that happen to me. I've done it to others, and I've seen it happen, and I've been the 4th person who goes, well, if none of you are going to walk in, I come in 10 seconds later while you're all fighting to see who gets to hold the door open for who. I just walk right in rudely. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be the non-Canadian for that. Anyway, all right, so I got a question for you all to kind of get things started here. Now, among the new sub-lines for Masters of the Universe, which one do you think is paving the way best for the future? Loaded question. I know what ones we think, and I know what ones are probably going to pave the way for the future for the next generation. But let's talk anyway. We got Origins out there. We got Masterverse. We got CGI. We had the short-lived Masters of the Universe. What do you think is going to pave the way for the future best? Clockwise, we got Krister first. What do you think, sir?
I think it's all a personal taste, really. I think the CGI is very much aimed at the younger audience, the younger watchers. I don't know if it really catches on, how it's doing. I haven't seen none of it in the Netherlands retail stores, to be honest. But the same goes for Masterverse or Origins. None of it in the Netherlands in retail stores in the area where I live. I think from a grown-up, from us who were kids back in the day when the vintage was out, Origins is definitely aiming at that nostalgia factor, you know. This is an Origins He-Man figure. This is an original vintage He-Man still on card from the 80s.
Whoa!
You can get the same fun sensation from ripping this off the card, getting the same feeling back in the day when you unpacked the vintage one. So it's really aimed at that nostalgia. And I think Origins definitely has got my personal favorite vote on that one. Though I must say when Revelation started and slowly turned into the Masterverse, am I saying that correctly? The follow-up of the classics too, they're putting up some good stuff too. So it's really gonna be hard keeping away from that and get some money to stay on my bank account, because that's beautiful stuff there. But Origins for me.
Good answer. And well said, actually. And I didn't realize you still had a original Masters of the Universe figure on card. So whenever you comment and go, wow, Ken, I love your collection. You know what I don't have? An original He-Man on card. You know, I'll probably never get an original He-Man on card. So, you know.
Never say never. Never say never, my friend.
No, that's true. That's true. You could just mail yours over as a Secret Santa, and I'll send something back. Speaking of passive aggressive, Dom, why don't you weigh in on the topic here?
Yeah, so the question was, what of these sublines do we think will actually catapult this and continue the momentum forward, right? If I'm
be it long term or short term, it's very open ended.
So I think, and we kind of touched on this on Chad's channel in the past, but we're going to be dead, right? And our kids and grandkids will continue to live on, and that has to be where you sink your roots. You gotta get them hooked on the drug early, right? So they have life customers, right? So I think that appealing to kids while appealing to us while we're still hanging around here in the nostalgia factor, and combining that, because I have the money, my sons don't have any money, I'm using that purchasing power for them and get stuff that they want as well. Now, if it hooks into my interest in my past too, I think that's the way to get it. I think the golden sweet spot is the Origins. Like I have my friend Joe who does a live show with me. He likes the MOTU Classics, but he buys Origins for his infant son, and then he buys kind of that middle ground of Masterverse for his daughter who's 5, right? So he'll get her some of the more articulated ones, but he'll scratch his nostalgia itch and give it to his son, and then he can play with those. For my boys, we don't watch the CGI one. I've pulled them into the Masterverse and Revelations, and they love the Revelation show, like absolutely. So they identify. I've got Beastman on there. They saw him like, Dad, you have to get that guy. So they conned me into buying more toys. But I would say the sweet spot is appealing to the people who have the money, and also making sure that the younger generation it's appealing to them too. I think Origins hits that spot there.
Fair enough. That's actually a good story. Because my boy, I can't get him into anything really, but he likes Transformers because it's robots and it's cars. So like I couldn't get him into He-Man to save my life. And I mean, the Revelations cartoon, the second half was better than the first half, in my opinion. First half had some salvageable aspects, but the second half is where I was like, this is a good show. So
not to just, I'm going to put a pin here and let Paul go, and we can circle back, Ken. But there is something to be said about the significance of science fiction and fantasy being in the popularity of the mainstream right now too. That's a big, and D&D also. Those are 3 big selling points for this brand. But I'll move on, and we can come back to that.
No, it's all good. Always glad to get your insights. Paul, future of MOTU in your hands right now.
I think Origins personally has done a lot of good for the future of MOTU. I think a lot in the minds especially in the hearts and minds of anybody who's like sort of in their mid to late 30s and up. I think it's been great for us to have that resurgence of having this toy line that when we were kids, for some of us was really difficult to get hold of. I know for myself, especially as a kid, it was hard for me to get MOTU stuff. It was popular, but I caught on sort of to the tail end of the toy line. So I feel like Origins is going to go forward. It's doing a lot bigger. It's doing a lot of the big stuff like the castles. It's got all the accessories and everything going. I think the CGI show, and I love the CGI show, by the way. I feel like it's in its current incarnation, it might not be the thing that takes it forward, but I think it's definitely planting a seed. And I think whatever actually comes out kind of next is what's going to be the future of MOTU. And I know that's not like the most direct answer, but I kind of feel like that's where it's going, because I feel like MOTU is one really good movie away from exploding. That's just like how Transformers was. I mean, Transformers was pretty much dead, and Michael Bay's films came out, and wow, bang, all of a sudden Transformer fever. And there were toys already, so kids were like tuning into that. So I'm kind of thinking that's what's going to happen. I kind of feel like Origins will still be the future of the line, but that the CG has planted a seed in a big way. And Masterverse feels like, I don't know if Masterverse is the future of the line, in the sense that, yes, they're making great toys. They got great designs. Okay, mostly great toys. But I don't know. I just don't see a lot of kids getting into that line to take that forward. I feel like this is a line that's sort of supposed to... this is a thank you line. This is like, hey, fans, thank you for loving He-Man. Let's give you this cool line. I feel like it's a thank you line, as opposed to like a direct...
For sure.
Anyway, yeah, that's my answer on that right now, as I find myself.
No, it's all good, and a lot of what you just said has led into what I want to say there, Paul, is that if you go back to the early 2000s, when I was collecting Transformers, it was very much what MOTU was a few years ago, and what G.I. Joe was at the start of the classified line. Adults were collecting them, and they were getting into the modern game, right? You can tell I kind of like Transformers just a little bit. But there was nothing to really hook the kids to the next generation other than, oh, cool, my dad watches cool robots, right? Much as I don't like the Michael Bay films, they needed that for the next generation. Now, my son was born after the films, that big surge of films was popular, but my nephew, who's a few years older than him, his Optimus Prime is equally as much the Michael Michael Bay. Sorry, I have trouble getting the words out of my mouth, but the Michael Bay and the Generation 1 Peter Cullen style. That one I had no trouble saying out. But it extended the line to the next generation. And the CGI cartoon, you either hear adults saying that's what that's hopefully going to be. I don't think it's quite exploded to that level yet, but it's there. It's present, and it's not going anywhere yet. And that's what bridges us to the next generation. And some adults say, oh, it's not for me, or whatnot. Look, guys, no hands on the controls. Actually, Chris has StreamYard controls. That's why he's able to pull up chats. And yes, feel free to pull up chats as you need to, Chris, in case I'm not watching or I'm rambling or ranting. That's absolutely what I hope that the CGI is able to do. Origins is like the equivalent of G.I. Joe Classified or Transformers Legacy, Studio 86, War for Cybertron. So, He-Man's kind of figuring out the thing the Transformers had done. And I keep going back to these three because they're the three big ones of the 80s, right? That was the big three. And G.I. Joe has managed to catch the classified wave, which in my opinion is like the origin / Masterverse, but they haven't hooked the next generation in with their CGI and Michael Bay yet, if that makes sense. I always tie these three franchises together because of their dominance. Yeah, I know you do. You definitely do, Paul. So that's kind of how I weigh in on this particular topic. And before I forget, all three of these gentlemen's links are in the description below. I know I mentioned Dom's in his intro, but you can subscribe to Chasing 80s Toys, who just got the 1,700 subscribers. Nice. And the Joburg channel, which... Yep.
Wow, Chris.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Sorry, man. That's
bad.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. So... I don't know if anyone else wants to close the loop on that topic. Dom, did you want to add something quickly to that?
I think Paul's note was really interesting, that he finds it to be just a hair's breadth away from what it needs to catalyze that. And you can see the Mattel is playing the experiment game, right? They invested into 3 different toy lines in Walmart, in retail, big box stores. That's 3 ways that they're trying to buy in to customers, be like, what is going to catch here? And they paid for animation, right? And animation's really expensive. It's easier to do live action, right? So they invested in 2 animated shows to go out there. Again, they're just tossing hooks out there, like, what works? I think that shows that the company is dedicated to their IP, where we could talk G.I. Joe and Hasbro handling that in another conversation. But I think that Mattel is handling it smartly. And you're right. The classics did nothing to carry that line. And as soon as that sub died, as soon as the subscription program died, like, it just petered out, and then they've resurged in it. So I'm really curious to see. You're right, Paul. Like, I'm kind of like looking at the calendar here. Like, when will they drop the hammer and really push out a big budget thing to push it up? And I wonder, and this is going back to my earlier comment, if they could tie it in. If D&D, which is Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, if they push something out, it'd be the perfect time to try and sandwich out another fantasy. You ride that fantasy high, and that would help you coast out. So.
Actually, that's very well said.
I'm going to leave now. I'm out.
All right.
Everything here will be just ignorant, so I'm done.
All right, cool. We'll see you in a few weeks, Dom. Take care. All right. So I think he's going to bed. I think he's going to bed nice and early, or he's going for lunch or something like that.
I'm gonna get another wig.
That one, everybody laughed. Okay. No, very well said. And thank you for adding the links to the chat there. Scuba Pete. And there we go.
What's up, Scuba Pete?
One thing I really like that I guess this has been going on a little bit since the 2000X Mike Young Productions cartoon.
Loved it.
Absolutely loved it. Ended too soon. It just wasn't what kids were looking for back in the day, even though adults loved it. And it's aged very well, despite being like a 2002, 2003 cartoon. But we should discuss some of the new characters that have been added to the lore. Look, since the early 2000s, King Grayskull, right? Wundar has been worked in to Origins now, and previously was released with a loaf of Wonder Bread in Classics. But he's still considered relatively new, right? Because he was a bit of an Easter egg back in the 80s, right? Sunman has been amalgamated in, right? The Eternia goddess, I think it may have appeared in the original mini comics, but wasn't fully accepted into the lore. And then we got her, I think we got her in classics and we got her in Origins as well. As collectors, what do you think of these additional extended cast of characters? Do any of them stand out for you more than others? Let's circle back to Chris here.
Yeah, definitely some stand out much more to me personally than others, especially because I collect mostly vintage toys. I don't really collect newer toys. Origins being an exception to that, because that really sparks my nostalgia. And therefore, I aim to collect only the figures that I had back in the day as a kid, you know. So Sunman, how cool the idea behind it might be, it doesn't sparkle my nostalgia that much. Eternia Goddess, I have her in the collection. Very cool figure, but doesn't really sparkle my nostalgia. No, not really. The big thing, the big win for me from Origins, maybe I'm walking ahead on topic now, is that I can get figures like Ninjor or Scareglow for the price of 20 euros over here. And getting these guys vintage nowadays, it's going to break my bank account. So that's a big win in Origins. So that's what I like. But for the new characters coming on, yeah, one more than the other, I suppose. But no
Fair enough
for me there.
Fair enough. Dom.
Yeah, I'm going to be the ugly American and tell you your opinion is wrong, Chris. No, so and I want to caveat with how I purchase toys, though. So I don't go for the nostalgia stuff. Like, that's absolutely not why I'm purchasing. Every now and then I'll see a figure where I'm like, dang it, I got to have a representation of Optimus. But I don't need all of them. I don't, I still haven't bought my Optimus yet. But there's very few that I chase to get that sensation back. Instead, and this is only further driven by my boys, is that we buy to play. So I'll show what I've got set up behind screen here whenever we transition and really give that example of it. But I love new characters being introduced and refreshed into there. I'm a big comic book fan. You can have Batman, but it's great to bring in Red Hood or Damian Wayne. I'm like, oh, this is refreshing. This is so good. It's a new character. And honestly, for representation, that's a big deal too. Like the Tila's partner in the Revelation show, I thought it was a great character. I bought that figure. She's got one little blaster and cloth goods. I'm like, this is a good toy. It's a good character. For me, and that's what I'm looking for, is like, I need some more imagination, some more storytelling, and some more playability. And we also purchase in order to crisscross between brands all the time. And again, I'll do the spread later here, but that is how I purchase, and my personal thing. And no knock on nostalgia buying. I'm always impressed whenever I see people's antique displays, because they're becoming antiques, right? But I sold all of my classic stuff in order to buy newer things. Yeah, I got rid of all of it except for the very first figures that I had as a kid, Adam and the battle armors and the 2 main castles. But that's it. I purged all the other stuff to buy new figures. Yeah, I know. So, but that's because that's how I want my collection to be oriented. So that's it.
That's quite the story. I mean, I'd have a hard time getting rid of the classic stuff.
But Chris said it too earlier when he compared the 2 packages. He said, it's a satisfaction of being able to open it up, just like when you were a kid on Christmas morning or whatever, and being able to crack that open and be like, and that toy smell, it triggers all that dopamine. That is a great high to chase. It's a dangerous high to chase, right? But it is a great thing to chase. And I think that there's something to be said that's wholesome about that. And there's nothing wrong. It's just a different approach. That's all.
Yeah. And before I jump to Paul's thoughts on the same topic, first off, Dom, a lot of people are like, wow, you sold your classics. It's a brave thing to do.
Out of here. Out. Because, they're taking up space, So.
Yeah, I mean, most of my classics are down here. That's why I'm on this wall. It's a shelf you can't see. Right, that's why I'm not facing my other wall right now. But before I jump into Paul's thoughts on this topic, Robert Monti, I just want to say thank you for the super chat. And he says he's a MOTU Classics diehard, but he appreciates the Origins and Masterverse because he's able to purchase cheaper MOTU product for his son, nieces, and nephews. There you go, Robert, forging the path for the next generation. Every collector in the world was a Robert Monti. These franchises are more important than us individual collectors in my mind. Right. I mean, in the silver age of comics, if those people thought that the kids of that era, that came after, which is us, would continue to be involved in reading comics and supporting the MCU and all that, they'd have been happy to pass it on to the next generation. And Gentleman Robert here is one of those leading the charge. Paul, thoughts on the new lore of characters and the new wave of...
So
yeah,
I think it's a very cool thing, actually. I didn't know about Sandman at all until they did the Origins re-releases. But it was cool to get them in. I know, being on a few fan forums here locally, I can see guys are kind of hit and miss with Sandman, but like King Grayskull, yes please, very cool character. We need characters like King Grayskull. I also like, is it really a new character? But it kind of is like Savage He-Man, that like sort of barbarian style He-Man and the barbarian style like Skeletor from the Masterverse line. Oh yes please.
Oh, new Eternia, yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very cool stuff. And I think the line benefits from that just as much as how I feel G.I. Joe benefits from having new characters or characters we have seen or heard about in a comic book or cartoon being realized as an action figure. Because Sandman, I know, was released as an action figure line, but King Grayskull was kind of spoken about. Like correct me if I'm wrong here, but from what I understand with King Grayskull, never existed, but people kind of like, this is a character, or must have been a character or something to that effect. But anyway, I don't want to pull stuff out of my butt. But the thing is, yes, it's rewarding for us as old school fans once again to have characters that were never released before, and that tradition kind of started with MOTU Classics, and I thought they did a cool job with that as well with getting characters in our hands. I mean, who's the other one as well? There's a character that's come out now recently in Origins. It wasn't initially... No, it was a figure. Okay, for me, like... what's his face? Mantikill? No, Mantikill. Mantenna. Mantikill's another thing. Mantenna, like, for me, I feel like that character has completely come to life now because of what they've done. But then to expand on that, I love that we're getting She-Ra stuff that when we were kids was, like, Bobby-sized. Now we're getting them as figures. So I'm also a big fan of that stuff.
Yeah.
Even though I may not pick up all of the Princesses of Power, because I got this one, and I'm super happy with this one, but I have been quite tempted by the Catra, and I can't remember the other girl's name. So, yes, I think it's a good thing. Glimmer. Thank you, guys. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. A lot to unpack there.
Sorry, man.
No, that's good. I know I picked the right panel. That's the case. It's a good conversation. Whenever they add something to the lore and it can fit in seamlessly, right? Like I may have mentioned in a previous stream, Transformers Drift, right here, he just fits right in. When G.I. Joe added Joe Colton to the line and basically said this was the original 1964 action soldier, right? And it ties in a way that makes sense and doesn't just feel shoehorned in. I absolutely like it. Now, I got asked the question, am I buying the new Eternia set? No, and I'll get a little bit on that later on, because he was asking if I was going to buy the Eternia. I'm not actually a big Origins guy, but Chris, you might have seen the Lineage of the He-Man Power Sword video I did back at the beginning of the year or end of last year. I can't remember, where I traced back the history of all the He-Men who held the Power Sword. When it can be done seamlessly, like when it starts with King Grayskull and this is the origin of the Power Sword. To me, that's really great. And then when you can work in, like, Vicor was worked in as a concept He-Man that was rejected back in the day, but they worked it into being like a He-Man of the North for classics. And then Wundar was worked in as part of the lore, so on and so forth. Or the fact that Sunman ties back to something big in our history with including more ethnic diversity into the line, right? To me, I love it when they do that, as long as the character doesn't feel forced and doesn't feel shoehorned in. When I heard the story of Sunman, I was like, man, that's the perfect crossover. And bam, he's in Origins, and bam, he is in Masterverse, right? And I wasn't an Origins guy. And what hooked me in, because I already got my fix with modern MOTU with Classics, tiny bit with Masterverse, but I got my fix. What hooked me into Origins, even though he's being released in Masterverse as well, was exactly Sunman. Right? So I'm going to get him, and my friend Troy, who's one of the patrons of the channel, is sending me Wundar. And those will be my only 2 Origins figures to start, because I love the idea of expanding. That's right, to start. Like, I've got a whole video series called Expanding the Range. Chris, you might have seen my Iconicon feature on that. And anytime you can get something to kind of expand the range of something, like Zazel and I collaborated on when my friend repainted the original 3 G.I. Joe Renegades into Marauders colors. And then you display them with the Marauders. Anything that expands the range intuitively, seamlessly, or if it doesn't, but it's part of our history, a toy history. And you know how much I love toy histories, right? I'm getting the chills just thinking about it, right? Something like Sunman, right? Where it's such a big part of toy history, and that was a little underserved back in the day, but is now getting more exposure. I just love when they expand, and I consider King Grayskull part of official He-Man lore and canon, helping to make sense to the Power Sword. So,
but just like the Joe Colton, like that is within the zeitgeist of that IP, right? So like Joe Colton, that's not. I would almost clarify that that's not a new character. They're just including part of the lore, right? But like, and let me specify, I got rid of all my 80s. I kept my MOTU Classics. That's what I purged all the 80s ones to buy Classics. But like, I don't think this guy is part of any previous lore, right? This was a Classics. It's basically a what's it called, a Dragonkin or whatever.
I was gonna say, was it Dragoman or?
Yeah, but this wasn't in any, because I love the Alcala comics. I love all that stuff back there. But I think this was an original concept. I think so was Photog, and so was Sir Laserlot. But you know, this guy didn't have, from my understanding, backstory or anything like that tied to it. This is a new character, and when you talk about seamless transition, I was like, this guy sits next to Gramamir for me, and he's amazing. Like, this is an incredible, and he's even got very stylized aesthetics towards the brand. But I think this is an all new character, and that's for me again. Like, I'm not arguing against, but I would clarify that as this is a new character. If it exists previously, like Wundar, I don't know if that's new. I think it's a new toy, but it's still in the lore, kind of speak. You know what I mean? I think that's
an urban legend. So,
yeah, well,
right, yeah, and great to do a tribute. Absolutely awesome to do a tribute to it. However, it's in our heads somewhere that we identify with it, right? So
yeah, and I think just in general, when you can amalgamate something existing in, like whether it's Joe Colton, but now you've tied him into the Real American Hero franchise, you've tied him into the popular franchise, or you've tied in Wundar, who was an Easter egg of a character back in the day, or Sunman, who existed as part of something completely separate IP-wise, but could seamlessly fit in and is very easily welcomed. Like, people don't look at Sunman and go, "What's that?" They go, "What's that?" Like, there's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And just the.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, it's something like that I wish they would do with G.I. Joe more, because we're sort of seeing it from Super 7's side. We're getting characters from the cartoon, from the Sunbow show, that never would have never been toys before and are completely obscure things, right? And I'm talking about like a Shipwreck and Snake Eyes set when they sneak into the Cobra facility. I'm talking about characters like what's the name? Can't believe I'm blanking. You know, when you're on like somebody else's show and then you just blank about the stupidest stuff. But anyway, Super 7's doing a great job by reaching into that side of the catalog, and it's awesome. And you know, I wish the people who made G.I. Joe would do that, because I don't want to disparage them on your show. But it's cool that Mattel is doing that.
We talked this, Ken, on Chad's channel, and like up here is IDW comic books, right? And like you talk about characters that are these guys over here, Cobra Civil War, and then you've got some of the Chuckles Cobra lines, and then you know it's the IDW, but man, you talk about untapped characters that are in there with potential.
Totally.
From Drake, like there is so much in there, and their stories are rich. Every time I'm like, you're missing the boat here. Are you staying on me so I can pull something down? Is that what this is?
It's just because you were gesturing, and it's easier to.
I'm very animated. I'm very animated, right? So this is a weird thing that I do that I want to talk about. But anyways, this series, like, and you talk about like how Classified missed the boat. I talked this before about like the Fall of G.I. Joe comic. So good, so Black Ops, and then you've got Cobra Civil War, where they actually introduced this character here, which is like a modern Dr. Venom Vargas. I was like, they're so Zartan's daughter. There's so many.
Oh, Zanya. That's another one I really liked was Zanya.
There's so much stuff out there.
Kamakura. There we go.
Oh, yeah, Kamakura. But that's cool. But I mean, at least we got him as a toy. Now, it'd be cool if the company that makes G.I. Joe toys would actually make O-ring figures of that. Just how Mattel's doing Origins versions of characters that have never been
Take
released
this off
or-
my face, Ken. Take this off.
Sorry. I was. Thank you, Chris. I think Chris managed to save me on that. Thank
Paul
you.
talking while I'm sitting here.
I was literally trying to catch up to the chat.
Sorry,
Thank you, Chris. I was actually just gonna. I'm so glad that Chris and I share a StreamYard because like he can. It's so much easier knowing that he's got my back. I was actually scrolling back looking for the super chat, and Chris already has it. Thank you so much. Will I get? Is that question for who? Will we get a Castle Grayskull to rival Masterverse? Get a Castle Grayskull to rival Classic? A lot of people would like that because if they missed out on the Classics Castle Grayskull, wouldn't that be a thing? Because good luck trying to get one on the secondary market right now. Mm-hmm. And with Snake Mountain having been released so many years after that Castle Grayskull, if someone got the super expensive Snake Mountain, they would probably want to get a Masterverse Grayskull. Now, given the size of it, my guess is it's going to be a Mattel Creations crowdfund. My guess.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my current thought on it. But no, again, thank you for the super chat again, Robert Monti. So just kind of moving forward with our agenda of questions here. This was so mainstream, like this being He-Man, being so mainstream back in the days. Like I always say that it was the big three of the 80s with Joes and Transformers. Turtles came after, Star Wars came before. And then the big three of like the 2010 to 20 era was obviously Transformers was still in the mainstream, but so was Marvel Cinematic Universe and Star Wars again with some of the newer stuff, and of course with the Mandalorian having come out and tying back to previous lore and all that. Can Masters of the Universe be mainstream again? I'll start off by saying when I go into Walmart, I'm seeing a little bit more Masters of the Universe. They still have Toys R Us in Canada, and I've noticed in the local Toys R Us that's about 7 minutes from me, that Masters of the Universe pegs, and I don't know if I want to use the word planogram here, but I will just say planogram, is bigger right now than what the Transformers one is. Which I'm like, wow. Now, obviously, there's no Transformers media pushing anything out. War for Cybertron's over. Rise of the Beast movie, I don't think has come out yet. So, can it be mainstream again? Can it have the power again? Krister, let's go to you.
Ooh, I don't know, to be honest. I think it definitely can get a spotlight for a moment. So it once rises. If there would be a great, well done movie that could spark the toys and everything around it even more, I definitely can see it be there. I don't know if it's gonna have the power to stay there long enough. There's a lot of nostalgia fans with the new generations. I just don't see them in my own country. That's where I'm looking at. I just don't see enough love for it here, unfortunately, with newer generations. It's just not happening. Like I said, it's not in the toy stores over here. I spoke to a few toy companies in the Netherlands, and they said, yeah, we're not importing it. We're not having it on our shelves because it's too much of a fuss, or we're not going to sell it. And with a lot of dealers with web shops in the Netherlands where I actually get my Origins, I can see a lot of that stuff coming on discount now, that I'm thinking like, are you not getting rid of that anymore, or what's happening? Is there... I find it really hard to get a fix on, is there still a demand for it? Because I love it very much. MOTU is one of my favorite toy brands of all times, next to Mask and G.I. Joe. But, you know, there's a whole country here in the Netherlands. I don't know what the rest of my country is doing, but I don't know. I really don't know.
Hard to say. All right. Nope. That's a fair answer, because can we really know? I think we can. So, Dom,
I feel bad for Paul always going last. Paul, do you want to jump ahead of me because I'm so bombastic and loud? Do you want to go first?
Have you got a bit of a soapbox? If you got a bit of soapbox, we'll go to Paul.
I would totally like to comment on something that Chris has mentioned. So it's the same thing in South Africa. He-Man is popular in that it's deeply ingrained in my age group, or our age group, should we say? I'm assuming you guys are about the same age as me. It's deeply ingrained in us in that side of things, even more so than G.I. Joe is and than Transformers is, actually, because we don't have that kind of those toy lines don't have those roots here for some reason. I don't know what it is and why. Anyway, I just think it's weird, and I actually got a question for you guys. Is Masters of the Universe, the original cartoon, playing on any streaming service right now in your country now, guys? So that's kind of a problem, because what's happening is parents are going to the toy store or to the local grocery store. They're seeing the MOTU Origin stuff. They're getting all excited. The kids are like, "Oh, why is Daddy getting so excited about the little plastic mans?" And then he like, "Hey, Daddy, why you like this?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's based on this really cool cartoon." It's like, "I'll show you when I get home." And you go home and you can't find it on Netflix. You can't find it on any streaming service that we have available to us here. So I kind of feel like that's kind of missing. That part of the brand is missing now already. So, will it have the power again? Yes, I think it can. If it, like I said earlier, it has a great movie that's tied into it. If all of the media is shaking hands together and we all got stuff working together. And in my opinion, as much as I love Revelations, and I do enjoy Revelations, and I really love the CGI He-Man, I think we need to start leaning into He-Man being a little bit more fantasy and rock and roll. We need more album cover feeling to He-Man. I feel like that's being missed out on. That's a missed opportunity. Anyway, Dom, what say you, my man?
So I like your point strongly about the movie and the fantasy thing, and that resonates. I think this may not appeal to this audience or demographic, right? I may be talking about sports or car engines here instead, but I'm telling you, Dungeons & Dragons has never been more popular, right? It is
Agreed.
A multi-million-dollar franchise right now. They some company, I don't remember who, because there's been so much toy news, just released the LGN D&D figures, and people were going crazy about that. That has all that momentum of fantasy. Like, people want to see fantasy stuff. Game of Thrones, there is the opportunity to have this sink in. And millennials are also, plastic doesn't just die with us. Millennials enjoy collecting and buying things too. Yeah, yes, they do a lot of things digitally and a little different, but they are now in the age bracket having disposable income. They're out of college, they're into their main jobs. And they're even having kids at this point too, right? That's where that demographic is falling. So I think you're right, Paul. You got to hit that area now with something big, right? That will breach past those barriers of just us, right? You got to beyond the stratosphere there where we're at. And I think it's a great way to tie in to Dungeons and Dragons because it's fantasy, and you could make it grimdark if you wanted to, but that's a classic. Go back to your roots and make it more grim, like Batman. Yeah. You could find the healthy medium in there so you don't stain it. But the toxicity that will come is from the fans. Because if it is not the original, how I saw it when I was a kid, I hate it. Instantly rejecting as what is this? This isn't my. That is such a poisonous. And you see it in threads whenever they release a new thing. People will just nitpick, and I'm like, it looks like a really cool castle. I don't know what the problem is. So that is one of the problems as well. So yeah,
it is. I think if Netflix's Stranger Things had a bit more attention for He-Man in there. Yeah. That would have been a booster as well.
Yeah, there you go.
A series like that can boost the toy line back from the nostalgia box.
Absolutely. And the relevancy too, right? So the relevancy has to be with the diversity, and not knocking He-Man for its past, but Ken, there wasn't very many characters that looked like you. You know what I mean? That's a big thing for kids to be able to see someone that they reflect on, right? That's a big thing. So, but for us, we see a new character, we're like, oh, who is this guy? It's like, hey man, it identifies with this kid over here. He wants to be able to buy into this brand. Well,
that's why Sunman is so important.
Right. That's why you have to accept new characters in there that may not be tied to that, because it appeals broader to more people. That's what you need to be able to have. So that's my, not a soapbox necessarily, but I think that you can sandwich that with a movie and what D&D is doing, and you've got it. You can carry that momentum.
Well, I like what you said there. If I had some tooling budget, I'd make a Ken Man or as Gazz likes to call me,
Ken.
Kendar, and it would basically be on the He-Man
Kendar.
buck, but it would look a little bit like me. Glasses be damned. Yeah.
Kendar, like that.
Well,
me
whenever we're in this live chat together, Gaz always greets me as Kendar now, and I think Ryan Sweeney has taken to that as well. You see right there, you say Kendar, you say Kendar. People
change the channel name. Change the channel's name now. Yep.
Change the channel name. Well, speaking of channel controls, I like that me and Chris share because we share a StreamYard account with Scuba Pete, Jeff Barker, and Jody, who is technically the owner of the StreamYard account. Yeah. It'd be like, I always thought it'd be a hilarious. I've been talking to Sergeant Slaughterhouse about a April Fool's prank, but a great April Fool's prank is all of a sudden I just go live on Chasing 80s Toys and be like, "Wow, taking over the control." And then all of a sudden I'll go to bed, and then Chris wakes up. He's like, "Damn you!" He goes live with Toy Connection. He's like, "I'm live here, and I'm gonna curse up a storm. Here's some Barbie dolls, and we're gonna sing Barney songs." All of a sudden, as Ken watches, the subscription count go down. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was actually thinking now. You make a very good point about diversity and stuff in toys, and how that needs to change, and the toxicity of fans. And I know that in a lot of ways, that can be an episode in itself. But yes. But what I've been wondering about, so you get She-Ra. Actually, when I got this She-Ra figure, I kept thinking like, okay, cool. Like the boys' toys aisle, we've been very lucky in that we've been getting origin stuff in our scale, like in what we grew up with. But what happened to the girls who grew up with She-Ra? Why aren't they getting like the premium version of She-Ra in Barbie format? I mean, that's also kind of something I think Mattel should also do if they want to open up this line more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Barbie's still super powerful in toy stores. That's one. I think in South Africa, Mattel's strongest lines are Hot Wheels and Barbie. Nothing else that Mattel does, I feel, touches those two lines, unless it's a sub line that's that Mattel does that I don't know. Oh, and I keep is it the wrestling figures? They're not Mattel.
They are.
Are they? They are. There we go.
The WWE is Mattel. AEW is done by Jazzwares. That's why they were able to do the Masters of the WWE Universe.
Yeah, that's a very cool idea. So when it comes to that kind of representation and all that, I know I think it is a very important thing, and I think it does need to happen, and I think that's why we need characters like King Grayskull, especially King Grayskull being an African man. I think that's a really good thing, and also having characters like Sunman.
I actually was worried somebody was going to call me on that because I had the Caucasian version of King Grayskull on my thumbnail because it was my actual toy that I had, and I was thinking, oh, is someone gonna get snarky on me in the comments after the stream? Was like, you didn't show the ethnic minority version, and I'm like, well, yeah, but but I'm a minority, and that's a picture from my collection. That's okay, right?
No, but I hear where you're coming from with that. But my thinking is like, I get to teach kids. I'm an instructor, and I take kids for like martial arts stuff.
Oh, cool!
And when they come into into the classroom, and they got Spider-Man and Captain America, and I've got like 3 young African dudes, young little black guys. They are amazing little guys, and they all the one's like obsessed with Spider-Man, and he keeps like doing Spider-Man stuff all the time. And I'm like, it's important to him to know that somebody with superpowers looks the same as he does. That he can identify with, and that is definitely the future of every toy line. I feel like the one toy line that's the one brand that's done it really well. Sorry, come check out our podcast. I feel like G.I. Joe is probably the one thing that's actually handled diversity the best from the 80s. I actually feel like G.I. Joe wrote the playbook on diversity without trying.
Yeah. No, that's true. It was accepted as natural, like Torpedoes from Hawaii. Like that's how deep they got with diversity. He always stuck out in my mind was like, he's from Hawaii, like he's Hawaiian. And no, you're right. It was very natural. It wasn't forced. It was just like, this is acceptable. Look at the diversity here. There's females. And that was back in the 80s before we had females in combat arms, right? So like they accepted like, here's special operations. There's females. There's different diversities. And they continuously made new characters of that to reflect vehicle drivers or core characters. Cobra was always pretty I don't know, one shade, but exactly.
Yeah.
So they started changing that a little bit too with some of the viruses. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And Miles with the Spider-Verse, like that's a great example of how you take a known IP of Spider-Man, you change it almost completely. Like that movie was so artistically well done. And my boys were really young, and I remember them holding Spider-Man in their hands. Like they had Peter Parker and they had Miles, and my son was like, "Wait, this is Spider-Man?" I was like, "Yes." And he held up Miles like, "This is Spider-Man?" I was like, "Yes." He's like, "Oh, okay." Like instantly. And then Falcon was the same way. He's like, "Wait, this is Captain America?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Okay." Total acceptance of it and moved on. And now no one has to argue about, well, hey, you can't be Spider-Man because of this. Like, no, he can be. Just like Jane is Thor, he can be. It's really smart. The comic books, and you're right, G.I. Joe from the start was doing a good job in that. So.
Yeah, 100%. Oh man, wow, lots of things to think about. Because you're right, the Miles Morales aspect of it, and that was one of the early ones too, right? Like Miles Morales has been around for a good number of years. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, 2010 or something, maybe just a little bit earlier.
I think he jumped into the Ultimate Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe.
He did. They killed Peter Parker. Like this is a whole other thing. I could reach back and be like, "Hey, this is it right here, Death of Parker." Yeah. So. Ken, let me show really quick here, if you don't mind. I don't know if you had another topic here, but
I do, but we have time. We have time.
Oh, great. All right. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm like, hey, I buy to play here. I'm going to switch cameras up. So
yay.
So yeah. So for example, hold on. Let me. This is my Canon, so it's a little fussy. So you've got from starting the left here, Mythic Legions, and then I bought some custom effects for Magic for this little dude here. Then you've got the Witcher. You've got McLaughlin representation. You've got gargoyles. Right, I bought these really cheap, these like, I don't know what they're called, magma guys from old McLaughlin 90s. I was like, these are great, just
cool.
Yeah, they're just great little, fire lava guys. Bronx absolutely fits in with our Vampire Legion, the Lithia wave we just got here. So unfortunately, him and Demona are now in league with the Vampire waves. Yeah, I just got this big guy here from Black Adam. Definitely some sort of towering demon figure. And I love that you showed a Jurassic Park dinosaur because we've got Beastman. I'm going to get the Scorpius or Indominus Rex too. Hold on, let me steady my camera here.
That Scorpius is cool.
Yes. And then there's Masterverse with a Marvel Legends Build-A-Figure. And then we've got this weird Schleich, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
So Schleich.
Isn't that the character from Werewolf by Night?
No, this is just that brand of limited
in the back.
articulation.
In the back, I mean. Man thing, or whoever.
Man thing.
I have not watched
Ted,
it.
or Ted as they call him.
And then a very old Loki, like he can easily fit in with this wave here too. That's
the Toy Biz one.
Excellent comic and fantastic figure. I got rid of Toy Biz. I held on to him. This is a Halloween decoration I did a funny short of getting because now it's a Draco Lich that can ride on. And then this is actually something my son just did. I went to go find another Masterverse, and Stinkor has Scaregolow's hand on there. I was like, what happened here? He's like, oh, Dad, he's got a cursed hand. I'm like, that's genius, son. So
that's so cool.
And then we've got
you went metal.
This is some, I don't remember, like there was a 4-pack of animals. I'm like, well, that wolf's going in there. And then I've got, Masterverse, and then the Shao Kahn from Mortal Kombat.
Oh, so yes.
We definitely, and then of course I've got stuff like this, like there's, there it is, this like treasure chest that they can actually find loot in. And how extra I am, and this is tying to my D&D, really like the nerdy, we're gonna get hardcore nerdy here too, but I made the boys like a little, like a character sheet. They can actually, let me get the glare up there, like a little character sheet, very simplistic. And then we added, this is awesome. They're called Animated Spellbook. Let's see if this will actually turn without a glare. They're lenticular.
That's cool.
And the spells move. So when we play, they slap down a card and they go like, oh, I'm going to do Eldritch Blast in there too. So we are invested in storytelling and playing these games. And unfortunately, this is how I buy my toys. So if things can cross load, then they're going to go into my collection. And the downside of that is, it doesn't really limit my purchasing, but I don't have to get them all. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Wow. This is, I love how you've got all this, all seamlessly kind of like mashed up together, including even gargoyles, right? Which I've been watching a little bit more again on, because when I watched the series, I was like 12 and I wasn't super into it, but watching it again on Disney Plus is really great. So the fact you've got the NECA version of Demona there, there's just, wow. I always say a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to unpack here. Like, this is great. So this is what you're missing if you're not subscribed to the Toy Domination channel.
Oh yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for that plug.
Yep. I'll plug all 3 of your channels anytime. Although Paul probably doesn't need the help from me, but I'll plug his channel anyway because he's got the big channel. Well, what are you at now? 11? Are you at 11,000 subscribers yet?
Yeah,
or?
It's about 11. Yeah, I think. I haven't checked. I didn't check today.
So you'll understand the ups and downs of YouTube, because it's funny because when I hit 2,000, it was a very quick climb. Like, I plateaued, then I had a very quick climb to 2,000, and then all of a sudden I celebrated. I went online. I'm like, thanks everyone for your support, and YouTube must have heard me, because then it just went flatline for a few weeks after that, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, that's basically what it is. YouTube's like, hold my beer. So like 2001, 2002, 2003. 2004, and I'm just kind of like, then all of a sudden it goes down 1, then it goes down 2, then it goes up 2. Like, it's funny. I think it's the YouTube universe heard me. So, so yep. if you're gonna celebrate, be prepared for a plateau.
Yeah, I think it's cool when, like, for example, I see familiar names in the comments. Like, I see Ryan, and I see Gazz, and I see Scuba Pete, and and then I see others that have also commented on our videos, and I'm like, that to me, that's a more accurate metric of, like, if you're doing well. When you're seeing a lot of the people, the movers and shakers. Hey, Ryan, you're a mover and a shaker, and you too, Gazz.
And then as people collaborate like we're doing right now, the viewers of the channel all kind of cross pollinate exactly what you're saying. Like, I remember when I would do a live stream 4 or 5 months ago, and there'd be like 4 people in the chat, and I was happy with that. Or when I was doing premieres like 6-7 months ago, and it'd be like me and one other person in the premiere, right? Usually Gazz or Ryan Sweeney, sometimes Scuba Pete, right? Because I'd always premiere when Chris and Jody were asleep. So, right. But and then now, like, if I premiere something, I start seeing more of your followers in there, Paul and Chris, and lately Dom, which is kind of nice. Yeah.
I got a question for Dom. Just looking at that awesome toy display. At first, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, you're showing us like a collection of stuff, and then I realized, actually, no, this is what your kids have been playing with. So yeah. So how do you guys do that? Like, do you guys have like a time that you set aside when you play stuff like that with them?
100%.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask that because whenever my kid says, let's play, and I'm like, I'm sitting here setting up the camera, getting ready to go live with you folks. And it's like, kind of want to play, but I kind of want to play with the big boys too.
So that's why I imagine it gets tricky. Yeah.
So I've got a friend coming out. My best friend, we've known each other for 30 years, and we bonded over toys, in high school. He's coming out next week. We're actually going to play a event. We call it, so this is a deep question. I'm sorry to take up time here. We call it Adventurers. We have 3 mindsets that my boys and I play in. One is Adventurers, and that's the fantasy, dump fantasy stuff in there, right? And we're going to come out, and he likes Mythic Legions. So we're going to set up like an adventure for them. When they come home from school, my best friend and I are going to play Mythic Legions / Adventurers and run them through a little mini story of it. And then we're going to take a ton of pictures, and we're actually going to put it up on a live stream like, hey, this is how we played with our Dom's kids, my kids, and we led them through here. And it's hard with kids to take pictures because they're playing and they're constantly moving stuff. You're like, wait, just hold that pose, and it's all blurs. And I'm like, how do I capture this, right? Or like, speak that into the mic. And I don't want to break the immersion factor by getting all technical cameras and stuff with them. So I'm like, hey, I'm just going to have to talk these things. In order to take time,
food, not take photos of it. I get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. The time factor is big, and I feel like a bad community member because I can't catch all these streams. Like, I absolutely can't. And when it's on weekends, I always have to apologize. Like, I'm sorry, I can't make a Friday or Saturday night because Friday night is family, movie, and pizza night, and Saturday night is time with my wife to bond, or we go somewhere with the kids or whatever. So I have to bucket that time. On the weekdays, I come home, and it's about 2 days a week. I have to set something up the day before. We talk about like, hey, what do you want to play tomorrow? They're like, we want to play Subnautica with G.I. Joes. So it's 4-inch scales. And we play. Oh, I've got pictures. It was so much fun. So we bucket that time. I come home, I kick off my stuff, and I'm like, is your homework done? And we go downstairs and we play for 45 minutes. And like you do anything with your kids, or you have to like have that focused time. Like if you're gonna go throw a ball outside or whatever, you have focused time. And I'm not thinking about work. I'm immersing into the world with them, and the stuff they come up with now, because I love storytelling. Like I wrote a book, and I dungeon master, all this kind of stuff too. So that obviously has flowed on to them. That was a weird expression. That obviously has been picked up by them. It's imprinted. They have started making their own stories. So now I show up and I'm not making stuff. They're like, Dad, this is where we're going to start. Go get some of your Joy Toy figures and you're going to attack this town. And then I'm going to do this. And he set up this intricate lab where like creatures are being dissected. I was like, this is awesome. Like I get to take my characters I want to play with and I just immerse into your story. And like, that is a nostalgia trip for me, I guess. Like that is playing with kids' toys is the same thing as when I was a kid. I'm like, this is great, but I also get to kind of teach them some stuff too. Like I sneakily throw in ethics lessons every now and then. Like, oh, he stole from you, or you here it is. You can just take that gold. Like no one will see you, right? So like little stuff like that. So,
but our cartoons always had that in the 80s,
exactly.
right? And don't do drugs, kids. And knowing is half the battle. You know.
But role playing RPG, tabletop RPG role playing. I said the same thing, but I came back. But that is what RPGs are the best with. They do give you moral challenges and things like that. No, the reason I ask, actually, we've recently had Comic-Con in South Africa. SA Comic-Con is what we call it here. Or Comic-Con Africa. I keep pulling it SA Comic-Con. And we have a section of that. It's called Kids Con. And that was full of, like, role-playing and Magic the Gathering, like TCG, and guys doing, like, little guys doing Minecraft tournaments and things like that. And that was incredible to see. And I've never seen, aside from actually being to a dedicated geeky convention, which we kind of have in South Africa, I've never seen that many role players in the same space before. And that was incredible to see that all of them were like in their teens or early teens. So,
and so I am such a creator, right? So again, this is why I buy for storytelling. That's how I purchase my toys. But I also love tactical tabletop games. So I designed a 1/18 scale tactical tabletop game to be able to like very mechanically, not like character driven, very mechanically play like Flames of War or Warhammer or whatever like that too. And it's D6s. And I was explaining this to my son, and he was like, "Oh, I want to roll." And I actually have like two out here. He's like, "Well, I want to roll to see if I cast that spell." I was like, yeah, "Sure." So he'd throw down numbers. He's like, "Oh, I did it." And I'm like, "Man, that." And I asked him, I was like, because we imagined too, but I was like, "Why do you like that?" He's like, "It's the randomness, Dad. Like, it's so cool to add that element. Like, I don't know if it's going to work or not." I was like, "Man, there's something to be said here." So I started crafting an action figure RPG game, and I stole ideas from like stuff like this, like easy D6. Like, it's very simplistic. Grown-ups play this. I'm like, there's got to be a market for this somewhere. So I'm that's kind of what I'm tailoring my focus to.
That's a great comment.
Yeah.
Nice one, Bob Squad. And also, what's up, Bob Squad? I didn't even call you out earlier. Yeah. Follow Bob Squad.
Talk about somebody who plays with his toy and makes those wonderful Bob videos. That's if I can do a plug for Bob Squad's channel on YouTube.
Feel free to drop the link in the chat.
It's awesome.
I'm gonna write it down.
Sorry about that. Dom, I got two questions for you, because you seem to have a seamless time playing with your kids, and I sometimes, as much as I want to, I'm not 100% sure how to do it as seamlessly as other people. How old are your boys, by the way?
They're 7 and 5, and I'll say that one of the hangups. So I don't have displays like you guys in the background, because I can't take the time to constantly reset them. Like that is, I don't have a display collection. I have this instead. Give me just 2 seconds.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I also wanted to ask him in a bit whether or not it's possible to play Dungeons and Dragons like on StreamYard or something, because
I think it totally is.
Which I'll ask him in a bit, because he'll know. Dom will know that answer for sure.
What will I know?
Oh, I wanted to ask as a follow-up question, now that I'm interrupting the first question that I asked. Is it possible to play Dungeons and Dragons on StreamYard with your friends?
Oh, yeah. So actually, the 1/18 scale tabletop game I designed was I played on Roll20, which is a virtual tabletop for RPGs, and then you can share a browser. So I pulled that into StreamYard, and my alpha testers played it virtually because they live in Arizona and California. So I had to tweak some mechanics because virtual is different than outside in the yard, but they helped me alpha test a lot of the hangups and make unit cards and stuff. So that's how I did it. So yes, you share a browser and you have a virtual tabletop.
Okay. No, perfect. I just wanted to ask because I used to play the second edition of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons back in the 1990s, and sometimes we'd play over the phone, and I'd be like,
wow.
I'd roll the dice, and I'd be like, you know what? I'm just gonna say it's a critical hit every single time. He
Just
can't
fudge
see
it.
what dice
Yeah.
what dice I rolled. So yeah, that was. Anyway, you were gonna show something in that.
So I bought those IKEA shelves. This is like 1 of 10, right? It's just a big old bucket, and I keep the art, and I just started slapping on the front there. One, so the boys know what's in these drawers, but because the art's gorgeous, so I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna absolutely.
Yeah, that's not trash. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And I don't keep the boxes. So I'm like, well, this will tell them what's in here. And then the bucket is just filled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is our vampire drawer, right? So all the vampire things go in here, and you've got Evolve to MOTU to this weird bat demon from the movies, and even that weird. This is hard doing it backwards. Let me just do by feel. This is like that Warhammer or whatever League of Legends type. So and you see there's a thematic theme of like purple.
Yeah.
But this is the bucket because I can't go back on the shelf and stand all these things up every time we play. And if you saw my toy room right now, there's like 2 games going on the floor. So the time factor is also an acceptance of mess. And it's an acceptance of loss. And I know someone earlier in the chat was like, oh, you break a toy and you're out. I don't let them play with Mythic Legions by themselves because I have some of the first wave. And I'm like,
oh no,
that's $300. But they play with them. I still like absolutely, but I have to be there. That's the only acceptance to that, right? There's other stuff where they've got Thomas the train station. I'm like, do whatever you want with these bins, and they make their own custom figures, and they got it. And then I built this giant PlayStation spaceship. I've got the video on my channel, and it's not a diorama because it's constantly a mess. Like I go into where the lounge is supposed to be, and there's Jawas like pulling apart a droid with a Xeno in there. I'm like, I will never have this picturesque, so it's hard to take photos. But that is so fun to come downstairs. Like I feel like the dad from that Lego movie, where I like come downstairs. I'm like, why is the cat over here in the bar, right? So, but it's cool because I'll ask questions like, how did this happen? Like, oh, Dad, this guy got bit by a zombie and he ran around with a chainsaw. I'm like, this is awesome, man. Then I jump in and play. So,
nice.
Okay. I love hearing that. I needed the inspiration because I have a tendency, like, if my kid brings toys to the restaurant, I have a tendency to be like, check my YouTube analytics, blah, blah, blah. And he's pulling out Transformers and he's like, Dad, let's play. I'm like, hold on, replying comments. Like I feel so rotten doing that sometimes. But if I hear your story, I might get a little more inspired.
We were just talking about this with a couple last night. This is totally sidebar from what we were doing before, but you asked me, so I'm going to hog your airtime with it. Very good parenting philosophy that I read was it's hard for working parents to actually be able to have that focus time with a kid because even if you sit down and play Legos with them, your mind drifts. You start thinking about emails. You're like, what am I supposed to do? Did I do that chore? Did we supposed to? Shut all that off. 15 minutes of absolutely focused on my son showing me his bugs he caught that day to Finn showing me a custom figure. It doesn't have to be play. 15 minutes of just shut up and focus. The rest of the time, you can be like, hey, I gave you your time. I've got to have that. It's proven that kids are receptive to that. They know when you're distracted or you're unplugged. And when you're like plugging a Lego in and they're like, Dad, you're like, oh, yeah, my bad. Like they sense that. So clear that clutter out of the way and go, this is my Finn time, and that is it.
You know what? I remember because my dad was working so many hours back in the 80s. The one and only time he played G.I. Joes with me is very precious in my mind. And it must have only been 15 minutes because we had the mobile command center set up. He took my Cobra Maggot, and he doesn't remember this, right? But he took my Cobra Maggot, and he had the version 3 Cobra Commander attacking, and like, this is the leader, he's the strongest, and he was going through all my Joes, and it must have only been 15 minutes, but it's immortalized in my head. So what you just said today, Dom, might help me because I have this weird tendency to try to multitask all the time, right? My friends, including Ryan, are always telling me, take a bit of a break, Ken. Gaz is telling me, don't burn yourself out. Because even yesterday when I was listening to your stream with Adam and Zazel, I threw my headset on, like the unwired one, kind of like some of you guys have. I threw that one on, and I was listening to you folks, but I was also like filming stuff for my history of G.I. Joe in 1982 video, and then I'd quickly come back and comment, and I'd go that down, and my kid was watching TV, and I wanted to spend time with him, but I was already doing 2 things at the same time. It's hard in today's world to be able to do that, but at the same time, we have everything remote now. Like you can work from home. Some people do, some people don't. Some people do it part-time like me. And you have the ability of multiple devices where my phone camera was shooting B-roll and my device that I'm talking to you folks on right now was the one that I had my headset on listening to you folks. So, we have the luxuries, but we tend to take on too much. And I'm very guilty of taking on way too much. Yeah. There we go. Thank you, Chris. I was just about to pull that up, and Hans is absolutely right. Always multitasking. Even next week.
It's Hans Chow. I know
Hans
that
Chow.
man.
He knows that now. Yep. Even next week, and I'll mention it now. Next week, I have a toy show on the Sunday, which is going to take me the whole day. That's the one I'm hoping to run into Laser Pants and a few others at if he happens to be driving up for that. But that means I got to do the TKO on the Saturday, but I got to take my son to his Chinese/math class in the morning. So he goes in at 10 to 12. So I'm going to do a shortened TKO from 10:30 to 11:30 my time, just because I will do it. I will drop him off. I will come back. I will be set up. I will leave. I will go pick him up and carry on with my day. And I'm still going to do the toy show the next day. So it's one of those weird things where most people would just say, screw it. But good luck keeping me away from my toys. So
there's some good comments in the chat here about someone I didn't see the name because I was scanning through really quick. Like, hey, they played Lego with their daughters and their underwater world is still set up there. Like, if you want future nostalgia and you have kids, that's why I am building their nostalgia now. And they don't know who Clayface is. We call him Poop Monster since they were 3. That bubble will be broken one day. Like, wait, this is the Batman toy, because that nostalgia for them is what we play and create on the floors. And if we mimic something, that's their current nostalgia. So, Ken, just like anything in life, right? It's the quality over quantity kind of thing. A focused 15 minutes is better than a diluted hour long, right? So, like,
and I'm guilty of the diluted hour. Like when he goes on his scooter and I go to rollerblade, right? Because and he's trying to play like tag with me or something, and I'm kind of on my phone, kind of going like this. Yeah, that's nice, kiddo. That's cool. All right, yeah, I'll be right there. It's hard to do that, but like it gives me an hour. But I see what you're saying, like a diluted hour versus a focused 15 minutes. Anyway, that's all this spawned from us asking the question about whether we can pass on Masters of the Universe to the next generation.
Well, I think I think that's linked though, right? Those are absolutely linked on like a how-to thing. And again, like not plugging my own stuff, but we are going to show the game we played. And then I've had several people ask that, when they see me, like, how do you do that? I'm like, it's weird that I have to tell adult toy collectors how to play with toys with kids, but there are a couple tricks, because I saw some of the chats too. We're like, oh, my kid never picked up on it. My kids were doing the classic, like, I don't even have to in here, where they're like, nah, at first I was like, that's not how you play. I was like, and asking why questions during the game, just like you would if you're a dungeon master, stuff like that. There's techniques that, like, you see that imagination click in there too. I'm like, what do you think his real name is? They're like, I was like, why does he hate this other person? It's like, well, because he stole from me. I'm like, awesome, run. And like that kind of stuff, just you watch their imaginations, because their brains are wired to do that. They are ready and open computers to have stuff plugged in, and they are searching for those conduits. So, but enough on that. I'll talk more on my own thing about that. But yeah, I think they're absolutely linked.
Feel free to plug. I like seeing you play with your kids there. Like even when I clicked on the Athelia stream to watch that, you had them there, and I would not have thought to pull my kid into a Mythic Legions box opening for of all things.
Don't do it.
Oh, I know.
Because an hour was so, and I did it on IG, so like there's a lot of throttling going on there, and you have to use phones only. I was like, that was the worst, and their attention spans, because they're 7 and 5. Like I was like, this is too much. Never again am I doing an hour with them live on a camera. So we started doing bursts where it's like, hey, 5 minutes, talk about a figure, and then get out of here. And like they're energetic, they're focused, and then they're like, all right, I'm good. So yeah, that was a train wreck.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Chris. Jim Largo, thank you for the super chat. And he's got some kind words for you here, Dom. This toy domination has found the key to getting younger generations off of their phones and video games and back into action figures. Thanks, interaction and imagination shared from parents to kids. That's when I hope that our YouTube channels outlive us to the point that people are watching years later and saying, hey, and when we're all old and these videos outlast us. That's kind of my hope. What's this here, Bob? He's done with action figures. That's well said. So the one final question I wanted to ask, and then if we got time, I think Dom's got a funny game for us, is She-Ra Princess of Power, and Paul, I think, touched a little bit on this. Do we all think it can stand on its own once again, or is it going to be just a subline of MOTU as MOTU resurges? Like, do we think Princess of Power can be kind of like a kind of separate thing under the same larger umbrella again. Chris, we'll go back to you for this one.
Let's go counterclockwise. Go ahead, Paul.
We'll go Paul. Okay, we'll go Paul.
It's anti-clockwise,
cool.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Or like I know it as anti as well. So you mean that cool little show that had that completely different styling, that She-Ra Princesses of Power, because that was a great show, and I feel like for a long time, or when it popped up, I felt like that kind of carried the MOTU torch in a big way, because a lot of people in my Facebook feed that I don't know to be fans or geeks or anything like that were talking about that show. So I think that show had great reach. So I feel like it does have the potential. Also, controversial like opinion, but I always felt the original She-Ra TV series was better than MOTU. In a lot of ways. I felt like it had continuity, which I appreciated in it. I felt the villain was, although Hordak was kind of hokey, he was scary, and so was the Shadow Weaver.
Shadow Weaver, yeah.
Yeah, she was also a bit like, ooh. Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like She-Ra was stronger, but maybe it's also because that's what was on TV when I was a kid.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Wow. Dom?
So.
Oh, sorry, no, go ahead. Keep going, Paul.
No. I was going to go on to Dom. But
I think there's an excellent question that was brought up during this show where it's like, hey, how come, in the Barbie aisle or the doll aisle that you don't see this She-Ra resurgence, right? How come you don't see more female collectors posting or screaming about She-Ra in there? I'd be really curious to see the data that comes into companies like Mattel to see the demographics of who's buying stuff. That would be very interesting because there could be several factors in there. It could be that in the 80s, even more of a stigma against us buying stuff or doing stuff for more adults, or maybe even more for females doing that back then too. And so they had that extra. So now they're been drifted away even harder than a lot of adults were, right? Or males, right? So that could be a factor in there too. And then I only see men really posting about She-Ra. I actually see female collectors posting more about Transformers and G.I. Joe, which I did send a message like, hey, how come not She-Ra? She's like, She-Ra's a wimp. I'm like, all right, my bad. I don't know. And that's really curious, but I think that question has to be answered to who is buying that line. And that's how you'd appeal to it. I think if you went all girl mode, it may not be the best demographic to resurge that line like you would think would be the obvious choice, right? And female lines, doll lines, have gone through several other things since we were kids. Like Bratz was huge. There's I can't even remember. Like I walked
Monster
in
High.
Yeah, like these are bridging and carrying and maintaining that momentum in there too. So I don't know. And my question would be actually though, do you need a separate She-Ra, or with the way that we kind of accept like an asexual, genderless type toy line, like Pokemon, for example, could you just bucket He-Man and She-Ra together and then you've combining boys and girls play together? I don't know. That's interesting. And I've left more questions than answers, but that's my take.
That's
my
okay.
non-committal approach.
That's okay.
I'm reading.
We love you all the same.
But yeah, Dom, you bring up a good point there, and I would also love to see that, and I'd like to meet those fans as well, and maybe they can drop comments in this video and say, hey, yeah, I would love to have a 6th scale doll series of She-Ra or whatever's.
And I bet they be mostly men too,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's actually a cool thing because, hey guys, I mean, and don't get me wrong, but when I was a kid, I don't know what it was like for you guys, and I imagine it was the same, but it was highly taboo to buy a doll.
Oh yeah.
So like, as a boy, if you walked through what we call the pink aisle, over here, like Steve and I, if you even walked in the Barbie aisle as a young boy, there must have been a really, really good reason for it, like a bee chased you in there or something when we were kids.
Hey, even when I was 11 or 12, depending on the brand, like I was judged if people knew that I either watched Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or had the toys, because that was in kind of the mid grunge and rebellious era, right? Like the teenagers who were a few years older than me at the time were kind of moving into a different, I'm an adult now phase. And then the people who were 11 or 12 were glowing over those kids. So like I never told anyone when I was 11, 12, 13 that I was into Power Rangers, for example. That's kind of the same thing as what you say, a bee chased you into the pink aisle. Right. So yeah.
We did a toy shame stream last night about doll collectors and stuff like that. And Zazel Adam had some amazing like revelations on when they shucked that burden of guilt off or that shame off. And I was like, wow, it was pretty cool. Not to, again, plug my own thing, but it was a great conversation about that topic. And I was like, man, I liked hearing them explain their mentality on it.
Chris, did you want to weigh in on the same?
What was the initial question again? Because I'm
we
carried away with your beautiful stories.
I was gonna say we went off of it. Now you can weigh in on collector. On collector shame instead.
Can She-Ra stand on his own?
That was the original question. If you want to,
If I look in the cosplay scene where I'm very active, as you know, I've seen a lot of She-Ra cosplayers and Catra. And they mostly based on the Netflix She-Ra that Paul was just referring to, which is a really fun spin-off or whatever you want to call it of the vintage She-Ra series. There's much more She-Ra cosplay going on than MOTU cosplay. I think I'm the only Skeletor cosplayer in the Netherlands, maybe even in Belgium, Germany, or I don't know. You don't see a lot. And a buddy of mine, Ron, who's also cosplaying with me as Clawful or Merman, or you've seen the photos perhaps on my Insta. There's not much of that happening. Can it stand on its own? I think it could if going back to that movie, if they would. Do you remember that He-Man special movie, The Secret of the Sword in the 80s?
Oh yeah.
You know,
Love
She-Ra
that song,
and
man.
Yeah, it's a great song. Sticks in your head. She-Ra and He-Man on that, and that's great. And Hordak is in there, and Skeletor, and everything combined into one. And that's if they can relaunch something like that again, show that to the world, and from there off, you know, She-Ra can go her own way. You get some that could bring some new life into them. And then I can believe they can exist next to each other and have their both share of fans of the. So I think it could when launched correctly, or
I think that there's two franchises. You just reminded me, Ken. There's two franchises that all the franchises could learn from. It's Power Rangers and Pokemon. Because you know what shows are still coming out brand new. Like as of yesterday, there was new Pokemon episodes. I dropped my kids off at school. They're walking around, kids at that age, walking around with Pokemon stuff. I'm like, I remember being a kid when this came out. This is insane how that has just continued. And Power Rangers the same way. They changed who is running the shows, but that's still new episodes coming out. I'm like, you guys, they cracked the code. Those two brands, there's probably other ones, but those two ones jump out of my mind. I'm like, you win. You won at toys. Good job.
You look at the actors from Power Rangers who were in their early 20s back in the 1990s, and they're still showing up at Power Morphicon. You know, and like the actresses still look great, and they're signing autographs, and they have Instagram accounts.
Those are for adults, though. The kids. I walk my fire.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, and they're dressing up. They're like, I'm going to be a Power Ranger for Halloween. I'm like, it's 2022. How did they win? Like they won.
That's
they
true.
Got it. Yeah,
that's true. They did crack that code. Now I notice it's less viral than the 90s. Super Sentai. There you go. It's less viral than the 90s when everyone had to have a Megazord and Dragonzord.
Yeah.
But it's still like the idea of multicolored suits and jumping around, throwing kicks is still kind of cool today, which means that since my kid still started Taekwondo last week, I need to introduce him to the Power Rangers at some point because he will like that stuff.
Right.
Gentlemen, we're coming on 90 minutes here, but I did want to give. I can go a few minutes extra. It's not a huge deal for me unless you folks are in a rush. But Dom, you had a interesting word association game that I wonder if you're still up for.
Yeah. So. I like to do icebreakers whenever people graciously come to my channel here. And because it's such an international representation here, I thought one way to get to know each other better is to play a little quiz game here. So, and Chris, I didn't know that you were from the Netherlands until right before when Ken said, oh, he's from the Netherlands. So I quickly Googled some stuff to help me out with this. So if this is off, you just tell me like nobody says that anymore, right? Because everything that I looked for words from the Dutch words were like hello and goodbye. I was like, that's not what I'm trying to go for here. So we'll start with you, Paul. If you're talking to Ken and he calls someone a keener, what does that mean?
Gee, a keener?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You know what? I actually have no idea. And it's weird because I feel like if it is something from my country, it might be a bit of a tricky... No, I have no idea. Wow.
Ken, what's a keener?
You're looking at... One, overzealous, over obsessed won't stop what he's doing for anything, and almost to a frantically annoying point where you have to pull him off of what he's doing physically to the point of almost intervention, whatever he happens to be doing. Tries to get stuff done early, sets his own phantom deadlines in his head that's way ahead of when anyone actually needs something. Sorry, was it supposed to be like
I didn't say
words or
Ken.
three
I said
three-letters?
Keener, not Ken. Keener. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
but
so
one
it's-
means the other.
For millennials, right? It's the extra, it's the Chad, but in a nerdy center, in a very a type A kind of way. So, okay, Chris, you're talking to Paul, and he says "kiff." What context is he using "kiff" in?
Paul says GIF.
Kiff, K-I-F-F.
GIF. I don't know. Can you eat it? What is that?
Paul, help him out. What is that?
It means something is rad, that is cool. Like
Oh,
if,
rad.
yeah, so if you go, oh man, I just got Merman and he's kiff, dude, he's so rad, I love it. That's, yeah. And we have the kiffness as well. You can go and check him
Kiff.
out on YouTube.
Is that South African GIF?
It's a very South African word,
I
and
don't
it's a
know that
very
one.
old school South African word. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
All right, so Chris, I looked this up right beforehand. So if these are wrong, you can give me thumbs down, right? So Ken, you're talking to Chris, and he says, what's that? Stick a feather in someone's trousers. Is that? Please tell me that's still a thing you guys say, right, Chris? Please. Is that
In
your-
Dutch, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good. All right, so Ken, what does that expression mean?
It means something Bart Simpson would do to someone else on The Simpsons. It's really all I can think of. And if I've embarrassed myself, I apologize. / don't apologize.
Chris, help him
Can't
out.
look at myself right now.
Yeah, you can be proud of yourself. Here's a feather in your, you can be proud as a peacock with those beautiful feathers in the back. So I'm sticking a feather in your back so you can be proud.
Oh wow! And here I picture like Nelson Muntz sticking something in Bart's trousers, or Millhouse or something. I don't know. Anyway, so that's actually a good thing, not like a bullyish thing. Okay.
That's a
We'll
good
do
thing.
we'll do one more turn here, okay? Because I know you're sensitive to time here. So
No,
all
I'm
right.
not sensitive at all. This is so much fun.
All right, so Chris,
Yes.
you're talking to Ken, and he says, let's see, he says giver. You say something like that, he goes giver.
I give too much. Is that something like that? I'm a giver.
No, help out, Ken.
It's more like if I'm pushing a piano up a hill. Oh no, that's not a good example. On a construction site, because I used to be a construction inspector. I don't look the part, but like I'm trying to lift something. I'm not a very big guy, and you got someone on the side going giver. It's like it could either be a word of like get on it or a word of encouragement like you can do it. Like it's put a little more into it. The only reason I thought of the construction example is because Dom made the joke yesterday on one of the streams that if you're with a bunch of construction guys, would they, different context, but like kind of like, would they judge you for being kind of a toy person? And I lived that being an inspector in my 20s on the job sites. So yes, right.
Ken, you're talking to Paul, and he replies to you. He says, I hope I get this one. Yibo.
Oh, yebo.
Yebo. Yeah, there you go. Yebo.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, Yebo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just realized it was directed. It was directed at me, and the only thing I could picture is probably an animal of some sort.
Let's do it this way. Ask me if I love toys. So go, Paul, do you love toys?
Paul, do you love toys?
Yebo. Yebo, yes. So that's just, Yebo is a, I think it's a Sutu or it's a Zulu word. And it is basically just saying yes, but like a little bit extra. Yeah. It's like, yebo.
Affirmative.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Affirmative, as Billy on
That's
Power
cool.
Rangers used to say. That's actually really
Yeah.
cool. Wow.
Last one here, and again, Chris, I'm sorry, man. Like I got more language lessons than I did slang, right? So, so Paul, you're talking to Chris, and he says, unfortunately, peanut butter.
Unfortunately, I'm just trying to think. What is? Unfortunately, peanut butter. Wow. No, I have no idea. I'm even trying to think of what that would be in Afrikaans as well, because that's
in
close
Dutch,
to Dutch.
in Dutch, it's helaas pindakaas.
Oh, that's
That
like
might
that
help
would
you.
be like, Yeah, that's like whatever, isn't it? Kind of like, yeah, that's how I interpret it, but I'm probably wrong. Looking at Chris's face.
No, that's how I interpret it too, but I could be wrong. What is it, Dom? Tell us.
So it took it as it was both. It was either like a nonchalant or it was well, unfortunately, it's all peanut butter, like kind of a negative thing too. So again, I didn't know you're from the Netherlands. I would have tried a little harder last night, but Ken told me right before, so I was like, "Quick, Google, help me out." So,
but that's
Very
a
good.
nice deep cut. Yeah,
Which makes you a keener, Dom.
it is. No, yeah. So, well, it's really cool that this is like you literally have an international show here. You have 4 countries pulled into one here. One being the best of all, obviously. But that's really interesting that you're able to connect across, the oceans there and be able to pull them in. I thought that was pretty neat. So I just thought I'd play a little fun game to show the differences here, but have a little fun.
International vibe. You've got Canada, you've got Netherlands, the US, and South Africa. Like, that just shows if we ever could cross the streams, this was it. That was a fun game.
Yeah,
We're going to do that we're going to do that every time you're on, time permitting. Look, any final thoughts? I'll just open up the floor here on Masters of the Universe, the future, what you're working on next, whatever.
You want to talk about the Eternia set or somebody?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a bit about it when I had Grindhead Jim, Mega J Retro, and Cobra Lang on a couple months ago, but that was before the Kickstarter happened. So we were all kind of predicting. I can't believe I said the set was going to be 350 back then, because I remember saying 500, but I said 350 on the stream, which I'm like, how did I ever think that? I think because they didn't release the dimensions yet. And when they released the dimensions but not the price, I was like, this is going to be double of the new generation WWE ring, which was 250. So with the size of it, I started thinking 500 once I heard that it was going to be 3 by 4 feet. So yeah, thoughts on Eternia? Floor opened right up.
I think okay. Firstly, it's a no from me, but that's got nothing to do with the quality of the playset. I think that it's an incredible playset. I think it's so cool that it's being brought back to life, bigger and stronger and better than it would have been than it was when it came out originally. And yeah, listen, at the moment with any kind of crowdfunding, especially done by a big corporation, I am very skeptical of that kind of thing. But if they're going to make it super available, if people are going to crowdfund it and they go, okay, cool, and they make it a regular release, I'm totally behind it. But I just wish companies, and I know it's a big piece, but yeah, it's weird. Like it's a very weird ground for me. I must say I do side with guys like Michael from Retro Blasting when it comes to crowdfunding and voting with our credit cards. And I wonder if Mattel had just sort of said to us they intend on doing this, I think fan support would have been like, oh my word, take our money, Mattel, like can we just order a whole bunch now? I think that would have been more effective than doing a crowdfunding. But then again, isn't that a crowdfunding anyway? It's weird. But that said, I hope in 20 years time or in 30 years time, I'm hoping some of our kids are still talking about MOTU and how much fun they had with it and how much fun they had playing with their moms and their dads. How much fun they had playing toys with their moms and dads, and that MOTU and G.I. Joe and Mask and Transformers and all these things that we love are still around and better and stronger in 20 or 30 years time. So that's where I'm at with that.
Fair enough.
You guys?
Yes, you took the words out of my mouth almost. I did a video about my thoughts about what was fun in a hobby and what isn't fun, and making a point of the Eternia playset, how cool it looked. It's enormous. It looks really, really cool, but the circumstances how to get that toy, it's going to cost me almost around €1,000 to get it to the mainland of Europe where I live, with income tax and mail and everything, and that kind of ruins the fun. Plus the fact that I can get it in 2024, so that those are 2 deal breakers for me personally. But when I was a small boy in the 80s, I was walking home with my parents from a carnival, a kermis. Is that a carnival, Paul? Is that the same?
Yes, yeah.
That's a carnival. I was walking home, and there's this video rental store on my right side here. And I just stopped for a moment, and I look into the etalage, in the window. And there was a new movie out, Masters of the Universe, Dolph Lundgren. Frank Langeva. And in order to boost that movie there, they made a display with some He-Man figures. Some of them I know, some characters I didn't know. And there was a playset there. And I never seen anything like it before. And that was the first time and the only time that I ever saw in the wild a vintage Eternia playset. And luckily enough, making a bridge from that to what Ken was referring to, upcoming stuff on our channels, Scuba Pete, part of the Chasing 80s crew, with help of Jeff Barker, got his hands on a vintage Eternia playset, and we got a video in the makings about that. So we're going to bring that to you.
He's eventually going to have two Eternias. He's going to have the Origins and the original. Yep. And I'm like, don't you already have a USS Flag, Pete? And
he's going to get it for the box art. But
even Oh, and even like the Death Star he's got, which is big. And he's also got the Matt Mason Man in Space, which is huge because that was a bigger scale line back in the day. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah. Dom, I know you kind of gave your thoughts already on the.
I echo the crowdfunding thing. I don't want to be too negative, right? Because there's a lot of channels that like really are very opinionated about this. But I did buy the Grayskull Castle, and that wasn't necessarily crowdfunding, like Paul said. It was like, hey, pre-order it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. Plus, I was living in South Korea at the time, so the shipping was a lot too.
You're talking about the classics, the 2011 classics. Yeah, because try to cut you off. How was that one actually done? Because it was a pre-order, but did they take your money first? Because the word crowdfund and Kickstarter wasn't around at the time. How did they actually do that? Did they charge you first and then put it into production?
If I remember correctly, does anyone else have this? Does anyone else remember?
No.
Okay, so. From my wife got it for me for a surprise, and I was following it along, being like, I'm never going to get this, but I'll follow it. And all the toxicity surrounding it too was like they kept changing the scale and the design. They were swapping stuff out while people were trying to commit. So people were like, I'm going to pre-order, and then the company is like expecting to make these many, but as they were changing the design, people were bailing out of their pre-orders, and I was like, that was a terrible business move on both ends, like what you did to your customers, but also for your own company. Now you're going to have overhead that's sitting around. Like that was the dumbest thing you could have done. But once they were like, okay, it's coming, you got charged for it. So it was very pre-order-ish.
That was back when they showed like the foam model or whatever it was, or the cardboard model or whatever it was. And then I didn't know when you got charged, but I think what they did is they probably put the pre-orders in to show the company stockholders, look, we have this much committed. Except it's a very loose commitment because nobody's been charged yet. So I guess in a way it was like, because it was the predecessor to a Kickstarter, right? Because you needed to show the commitment from people to make the push to businesses before, but then people bailed and people came back in. Then when they committed, then you got charged. Okay, so that was, it was one of those pseudo Kickstarter,
so
pre-Kickstarter models. It's the Diaclone to the G1.
And I think the Eternia, like I'm glad to hear Chris said no, because I would hate to see you have to change that entire background to fit that. I don't know where you would put that, right?
Where would I put it?
Also, it's for Origins, which is a weird halfway scale between my classics, and then I'm like, this is a weird scale for me, and I don't think I hope that whoever gets it is happy with it, and I can't wait to see them like enjoying it. I don't want to steal joy. For my value, I think 500 is a lot to ask for that playset, and but again, that's where my pocketbook sits, right? Like I felt the same with the Ghost Rider car. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Little too much for me, Hasbro. So I think they overextended. My hope is that that company will course correct and be like, okay, maybe we got a little greedy there, and they kind of dial it down. The risk factor is, though, you make this huge thing and it sits on a shelf somewhere retail and it doesn't go anywhere, and then all of us wait for it to greedily go on clearance and then we buy it, which toy collectors are apt to do, right? So the risk in the company is they shove these big things out and it's at a loss, right? So
yeah, fair enough. And to echo what's been said already is that should we be grateful that we're getting it at all? Is that the glass half full? Is that a fair glass half full? Is it too high? I mean, when you scale it to the price of other things that are out there, it's kind of expected that was the price was going to be based on what the other Kickstarters are at. But if the other Kickstarters are already too high and you are going direct to consumer, so you're not exactly wholesaling it and then putting it at that price. So technically they could be making more margins on this than they otherwise would, but they're also producing smaller numbers because it's direct to consumer. So like, where's the halfway point? Where's the optimal? Like, without sitting in the boardroom there at Mattel or Hasbro, We don't really know. I mean, if somebody showed us the books and we go, oh my God, I didn't realize you were up against all this. This is totally fair. Or let's say they showed us the books, not that they ever would, and we go, yeah, you're totally gouging us. You know what I mean? Like, where is it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and like Ryan has,
too,
and like Ryan has said, retail doesn't want these big items because you know what? They're big. Like these skids come in, and imagine you're the retail manager at that big box store, and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is gonna sell. Like, there's so many kids.
And it hogs space for other products. It takes up too much real estate. So every spot in there is the potential to sell and push products. So
and depending on how many you make, let's say there's X number of Targets and X number of Walmarts, but you only make enough for like one per store or something, or two per store. Can they commit ongoing space for that? Right. So I kind of see what Ryan, I definitely see what Ryan is saying here. Yeah, I mean, you make more money by selling more items because the cost goes down. You're right. If you only make a few, or a few thousand, like it's 5,000 on Eternia. I mean, even if they hit 10,000, what is that compared to? You've seen limited runs of 25,000 before, right? What is that compared to? And that's just for 6-inch figures, right? So, look, there's a lot of great thoughts in the chat. A lot of great thoughts from you gentlemen. I think we're pretty much at the point where we've hit the full agenda plus some. So I'll just wrap things up here. Thank you everyone for your amazing insights. The three of you subscribe to Chasing 80s Toys, Toy Domination, G.I. Joburg. And thanks to everyone in the chat for putting up. Thank you for representing Chris, and thanks to everyone in the chat for your kind thoughts and comments there. Otherwise, let's call it right here and wave a goodbye to our fellow Masters of the Universe and toy fans. And we'll see you all again.
I have the power.
Goodbye, you boobs. I love this toy so much. I have my disco drum.
Take care. Take care, everyone. See you soon.
Cool, you sexy peeps.